St. Louis got lucky this summer, I think.
I think you're right. Randy, how are you doing?
Not good.
He is on mute.
He's muted.
There he is. Hey, Randy. Okay, let's get started. It's after 10 o'clock. So what are the categories that Maris uses to monitor listing data? I'm going to tell you here's the items that they look for in order to find a violation on your listings. It's the city, the area, inappropriate remarks and directions, an incorrect address, incorrect MLS area, an incorrect tax ID number, late listing input violation, a transaction that's been pending for over 4 months, sales data check, untimely status change violation, and a virtual tour violation. And let's touch on that pending for over 4 months. Typically that wouldn't happen unless it's something like new construction, right? Maybe you forgot to pend it. That would get you in trouble. The virtual tour violation happens when you're doing virtual tours. You know that your photographer does one specifically for MLS, and then they also do a branded version, which the branded version what you could use on social media. And occasionally you accidentally put the branded version on there, and that will cause you to get a strike. So I want to talk to you just a minute about what happens. So let's say August 1st, Sean gets a violation and it says educational notice, please review your listing for compliance. And you correct the issue and nothing happens. So you're not concerned about it. And about mid-September, Sean gets another email and it says, please review your listing. You have an educational warning notice. So you notice that the email is slightly different and contains the word warning, and he corrects that issue. And along about March or April of next year, he gets another violation. So I'm telling you, this is all within a 12-month period. Now he's got a fine for $100. And that if you get 3 fines within a 12-month period, you're going to get that $100 fine. After that, let's say, and this is really gets serious for those of you that have a lot of listings, at the next notice, if the 4th notice comes along within that 12-month period, that fine goes up to $250. And you'll have a minimum suspension from the service for 7 days. And then the next one, you were suspended for 30 days with a $1,000 fine. Now, this actually happened to one of our agents, not the $1,000 one, but the $100 one. And it took several weeks to get a response on how this took place because I couldn't find it anywhere and they couldn't find it either. This is all computer generated system. So I just wanted to bring your attention to the violations and what's happening with that.
What was the issue on the listing that was in compliance?
I want to say it might have been a marketing remark. Remember, you can't, they watch for words like parish. You can talk about a specific school district being Rockwood or something Parkway, but you can't talk about a parish, for example. I don't know if anybody else, several of you have had this violation at some point or another. If you want to speak up and share, if you don't want to, you don't have to.
In the remarketing remarks, you can't put your email address or your phone number in the marketing remarks. You can put them in agent remarks, certain information, but what you put in marketing remarks has to be pretty generic.
That's correct. So, it doesn't sound fair or right, but here's the why. You have your client set up to receive listings as they're entered. And if the listing is Everett's and it says call Everett in the remarks on that data that you're forwarding to your client, you don't want that to show. So that's the reason.
So, hey, Lynn, I have a question on the pending for more than 4 months.
Okay.
What do you do when you have that situation?
You have to call them. You have to call Maris. Because typically,
Okay.
any more than 4 months would be outside of the norm.
Because I have one that's about to be more than 4 months, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay. Yep. All right. Any other questions about what might be a violation? I mean, I could go through a whole bunch of things. You don't want to, stay away from words about who you think should live there. Focus on describing the property. And there's plenty of things you can talk about, the yard and all these other things, but you really shouldn't talk about the people. I see a lot of times people put great for first-time home buyers. You really shouldn't say that. Plus, if it's somebody who's not a first-time home buyer, they may not like you describing the property that way. I had an agent a long time ago put in there, we'll consider all offers. Well, the seller got so mad about that because he said, you've just told everybody that it's a fire sale, that I'm desperate. So I know some of you will write your words and then let your client read it over before you publish. I think that might be a great idea.
I have a question.
Yep.
So about the late listing input violation. So if you have a listing contract out there, like in DocuSign to sign, and it takes your clients like a week to get it signed and back to you, so the listing date would be like a week old at that point. What
would be late? So you'd have to do an amendment, or you could cross out that date on the top, call and say, hey, you haven't got that back to me now. So in order for me to stay in compliance with the MLS, if you'll mark out that date, put today's date and initial it for me.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Or just white it out and change it.
Okay.
Well, it's not an effective contract until they sign it. It doesn't matter what date it is. That's the date that you have the listing. Is that what you're saying? Change the date on the front page to match the date that they sign?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, the date on the listing is, she's talking about that date that the contract begins. So.
Because that's what you had to put in Maris.
Yes. But
But they haven't signed it for 4 days. It's not
Right.
effective until it's signed.
That's right. However, if the MREC, we're looking at two different versions here. You're looking at, when is it effective? And the MLS is saying, what's the listing date? So.
Okay, I see.
I don't know if you have, I think you would get in trouble more as if you put that coming soon sign out in the yard or something and you don't have it in the computer. That's where, you've sent it off to be for them to sign, and you ran over and you put that sign in the yard and it's not in the MLS. That will get you caught. That's a big problem. Okay. So question 3. You represent the seller. You receive an offer and the seller accepts the offer. Everything is going smoothly until you receive an email from the auditor at Remax Gold. The auditor informs you the sales contract is outdated. Can you prepare an addendum stating all parties agree the sales contract is outdated if everyone agrees to sign?
No, because it's not a valid form. and it wouldn't be
That's right.
covered by your E&O.
Right, Kathy. So, that's an embarrassing situation, especially on a listing because you've provided the form. So,
I've had it
Makes-
happen on inspection notice and some other riders that I got
Yes.
from another agent.
mhm.
Brian and I have
And-
one now. We have the seller's disclosure. It's from another agent. And I just sent her an email and said it's an outdated form. Can you get a new form dated this? And just have your seller print everything back in there. Sure, no problem. Okay.
So
I
it's
mean,
not,
yeah,
it's not so embarrassing when it's the other agent, but it's
Yeah.
real embarrassing when you're the one presenting the form. So obviously, it's always a good idea to get all of your forms from Forms or Us or online, not out of your car or an old file that's sitting around. I know I've had this happen with a couple agents recently where they take the listing contract and they download it and have it on their desktop. And they forgot to switch them out when they changed. Same way with the sales contract, so. Okay, we can move on. So when will the new version of the residential sale contract and the residential lease become available?
July 1st.
That's right. So like we talked about this last night, the forms change twice a year. If there's any changes made, typically they're twice a month. So when do you need to stop using the version prior to July 1st?
July 1st.
So the other one's
Ye-
still valid until the end of the
End of the
year,
year.
but we
Mhm.
prefer you start using the new contract immediately. There wasn't I sent you all the version changes a couple months ago, and it was a very minor correction, but I prefer you start using the new one immediately, and you would get that by downloading it from the Forms or Us program. Okay, so yeah, we've been having this happen a lot lately where the agent's submitting an offer on an invalid form, or they're using a sale contract, the addendums, riders, all sorts of things. So fortunately, we have very good auditors that are catching that. I know you're more focused on what the terms are or changes in an amendment than you are looking at the dates. So, but all right, we'll move on to number 5. You represent the buyer. The sewer lateral inspection came back and read, there is a break in the line approximately 10 feet from the sidewalk. Now you're preparing to write your inspection notice. Will this verbiage work? Seller agrees to have the sewer lateral line repaired at the break. See attached video.
Excuse me.
Carol, I see you shaking your head. What do you got
No,
to say?
I wouldn't use that,
Right.
because, they may have only said that there was one break. They may have missed something.
Mhm.
Oftentimes when you get into repair a sewer lateral, it will continue to break as it goes back. So if they say, well, we fixed the one you said, and, it created 3 more. Obviously you'd hope that that wouldn't happen, but it's definitely a possibility.
So you're 100% correct. We have the seller on this situation, and this is what the buyer wrote in the inspection notice. So our seller had the break fixed at that particular point. Well, then the buyer had a new video, and guess what? On the other side of that break were additional breaks. So be careful what you say, what you ask for. I think it's a great idea when you have something and this was very complicated. Sometimes ask one of your peers, hey Creighton, would you read this and tell me what you think it says? Don't tell them what you want it to say.
Well, so
Have a
I
big-
think a lot of these guys do this already, but you know, I would put that, but then I would say sellers provide, you know, a new video after repair showing, you know, free and clear of all defects between
Yes.
MSD and the house.
Mhm.
Something to that effect.
So if Jamie doesn't mind sharing, she had, I think, 2 in the last 10 days with sewer lateral issues, one being her own personal property. Yeah.
Hmm.
So Jamie, what were your remedies for those issues?
So on one property out in Baldwin, we got them to agree to use the contractor Taupe that we got an estimate through for all the repairs. They're gonna do a liner of the sewer lateral, because the seller didn't want to have anything dug up, in order to agree to it. But the liner comes with a 10-year product warranty and a 1-year labor warranty, which kind of gives everyone some peace of mind as well. The other property, the seller wanted to use their own contractor for the repair. It's someone that I'm not really familiar with, but we did put verbiage in the last inspection notice that we sent over that we do want a video of like a clear sewer line afterwards.
So for those of you that don't know, when you have issues underneath the house and there's a basement or not, it can be very expensive and invasive tearing up the floor. That Taupe, what they do is, it's probably not less expensive, but clearly not as evasive. So Jamie, that process, do you mind sharing that, what they do?
Yeah, it's something like they put this material through the pipe and like inflate it and then somehow get it to harden. And then it acts just like as the sewer line.
Yeah. Right, and I think having that warranty is very important. So 1 year labor, 10 years on product, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, yep, thank you for sharing that. All right,
Did you get your lateral fixed?
Yeah, I just had they hydrojetted my line because I had a sludge issue. And that because I have like a little belly in my line.
Right.
So they hydrojetted it, but the hydrojetting ended up backing up a bunch of crap into my house.
Oh,
So
no.
they came out like 2 days later, cabled it, jetted it again, and I think we're good.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. It was just a really stinky, messy job.
Oh,
wow. Yeah,
hmm.
so this is another little boring section that I want to go over with you because it's regarding a mutual release, and I get these, you know, several times a week, unfortunately, but a lot of times they're not filled out completely. And so I wanted to go over with what goes on these lines. So on line 5, and it lists the list, who's the listing broker and selling broker, what goes there?
The brokerage name,
That's
right?
it. The brokerage name, not my name. And oftentimes they'll have my name there, and it can be fixed. You can leave my name there and add Remax Gold, but it's not me personally. So make sure that you fill, and oftentimes the other agent fills it out wrong, and you're not changing the terms of this. So you could always add the brokerage name on, not just, it's fine. And then on lines 9, obviously, how much did the buyer put down in earnest money goes in that line. And now we're looking at lines 11 and 12. How much money is to be distributed? How much does the buyer get or the seller, or is it being split, broken up? Now, when you send me a mutual release and you're giving the money to the seller, you're going to get a call back from me. I want to know what's going on, because we recently had somebody on the other side send us a mutual release giving the money to our seller, everybody signed and agreed to it, and then they backtracked and didn't want to do that. And a mutual release is kind of a final, like, done, we're not suing, we're not gonna, so she's saying it was a typo, but her buyer missed the financing contingency date, so it didn't throw up a red flag. But that's what happened. And then you have the additional line 16 and 17, which would be used for, let's say they haven't paid for the survey yet, or an appraisal, or any inspections, or something like that. That's what you'd want to put in there. Any questions about that? You guys do a pretty good job of it, but I gotta tell you, at least 2 a week that I get are wrong, filled out incorrectly. Okay,
We just
number
like
8.
writing your name.
That's it. Mhm. I'm not personally getting the money, so. The seller has a mirror above the fireplace, and Jamie has a really cute little picture on here of that. Is that going to stay, or does it go with the seller?
It goes.
It stays and it's on the inclusion list.
Bathroom
Yeah.
mirrors are on the inclusion list.
No, they're
No, it says all
actually,
attached mirrors, I think.
let's take a look at the contract real quick on items that stay. And it is attached mirrors and all bathroom mirrors. So you want to get them to take them down if you can. Now, if it's the mirror that's on their dresser in their house, or something like it's attached to a dresser, that's not a worry, but that kind of a mirror is attached. So either you make sure that when you get an offer and they want to take it out, or have them take it down. Typically, it's always best to take it down, so it's not a negotiable item. I know, those tricks,
Stand
that's why I
corrected.
put it in here. Huh? What'd you
I
say?
stand corrected.
It's okay. Yeah, we're not correcting you. Hey, it's a common mistake, and I kind of like to throw these inclusions in here once in a while, and that's why we're doing it. Okay, you represent the seller. An agent from another company calls you and asks, did you or anyone from your office submit an offer on this property? Are you required to respond to that question?
Yes.
Randy, you're
Yes.
right. Randy's correct. Yes, you are. And so the answer is yes. And what if they ask you if you're giving the seller an incentive if you sell it yourself? Are you allowed to answer that question?
I would say
Yes.
you
Yeah,
should
that's a variable box.
disclose it.
Yeah.
You are correct. And
Like if
where
it's
would
a
you?
variable rate.
Yeah, so on the MLS profile sheet, when you're, where all the size, rooms, dimensions, all that sort of thing is listed, there's a box, a field that says variable rate, yes or no. And when you see that box checked, that's telling you that they could negotiate that commission. And you, as a buyer's agent, will have a right to know. And you could say, Creighton, how much are you giving them as an incentive? You have a right to know, so that when you're writing the offer for your buyer, hey, they're reducing their commission by 2% on that. So we at least have to be 2% higher on our offer.
I don't think everyone really checks that box. I've
I
seen
agree.
situations
Understand what it
with
is.
certain
agree with you.
brokers where that's competitive and there are multiple offers, and I'll be damned, the buyer is the same broker.
And we typically don't know that until it sells.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
And
even
I
if
didn't
you
think-
see no, doesn't mean you can't call and ask the question.
I think you should ask the question if it's a multiple offer. You know, it's gonna be competitive.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, if it's a $500,000 house and they're gonna reduce their commission by 2%, you got $10,000 right there, and you're gonna offer asking price, you better be moving it up 10 grand at least. Okay, we'll move on. You represent the seller. An offer is received and the buyer has checked not contingent upon financing. A week later, the buyer's agent is calling, asking if the seller would consider financing. We had the seller in the situation, and our seller was very upset because there was a pre-approval letter stating that the buyer had liquid funds to purchase this property. The buyer's name was an LLC. So it's something I want to talk to you about today. Did you know that you can look up an LLC and see who the people are involved in the LLC? So if you go to their website, the Missouri, it'll pop up here in a second. I wrote down the address for you, but in this particular situation, after this thing started falling apart, yes, the buyer can still get financing, even though they said, no, it's not contingent on financing. But when they get that call wanting the seller to take half of the money down cash and then finance the balance, this was over $1 million property.
So I'm
they were-
confused. They received a pre-approval letter, which would be from a lender, and
Right, well, guess
stating
what?
they had liquid funds. That would be a bank statement. That wouldn't be on a pre-approval that they've got funds to buy it
Exactly. So
cash.
Proof of law.
guess
proof of
what?
law.
The whole thing turns out was bogus, okay?
Oh,
So I'm looking at the letter, from this company in New Jersey. I Google it, pull it up, and yeah. I
Okay.
don't want to say it's your responsibility, but you might want to have your sellers do a little research on who the people are before you go forward with that. And then to top it all off, they never deposited the earnest money.
No.
So right away, I thought, okay, they're not gonna be able to do it. We'll keep their earnest money. They never deposited.
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah, that was not a nice call. But because after I got involved, I wanted to see what was really going on in the background and did some research and thought, this LLC person established an LLC 1 week prior to writing an offer on this building. And that person lives in an apartment down the street from this property. That unless they won the lottery, that wasn't really gonna happen.
well, that earnest money deposit should have been the very first flag.
Right. So that's what our next section's gonna be about, is earnest money. So you write an offer for a buyer and it's accepted. In paragraph number 3, the earnest money to be delivered to the title company within 3 days after the acceptance deadline. On day 4, you discovered the buyer did not deposit the earnest money. Now what?
You
What
were
should
out
you
of
do?
contract.
Now it's your buyer, so what are you gonna try to do to put this back together?
Get them in there to make that earnest deposit.
Make an amendment.
That's right, new amendment, gotta get on them, what happened? So my question right now would be, how many of you are recommending to your buyers that they use the trust funds?
Me,
Me, yes.
So I was told last night on this call that it's like $5. But I did find out last night is Kathy, she's getting an email from trust funds saying that money's received, and Mona's saying, I'm not getting anything. So are all of you getting any type of receipt? Joe, you're saying yes?
You get 3
No.
emails.
It's three.
I got one this morning.
So you get notified that the money was deposited, but what you don't get is a receipt for like, I didn't receive a receipt. I think it was like 7 days after it was deposited.
And Jamie, because Jamie does auditing, so Jamie, what's your policy on being, what do you accept as part of the final packet?
So we just need an email that it was at least submitted by the buyer. So you get 3 emails. You get one that your buyer was notified, which doesn't help anything. You get the second when they deposit, which you can send to us as your like confirmation. And then the third is when the earnest money is settled.
Mhm.
But I believe it says that when you get the one that says the earnest money has been submitted, then it's deemed to have been delivered to the title company.
Okay, and so when the auditors send you an email saying you're missing the following items, I'm sure you see that I get copied on that. I'm gonna say probably 7 out of 10 files don't have an earnest money receipt.
Well, sometimes you have to ask the title company for it,
Yeah.
because the other side, the buyer wired it, the buyer's agent doesn't have it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So a reason I wanted to put this on your radar in this case on the deal that just fell apart, they had gave themselves more than 3 days. I think they gave themselves 10 days or something. So we were just waiting for that earnest money to be deposited. It never did. Fortunately, our seller said, I'm moving on. I'm going to kill the deal, I'm doing a mutual release. But that's something when you're accepting an offer and they want to extend it out longer, you might want to sew up that time frame and don't give them that much time. Because what's the why? Do they not have the money to put down? That's a red flag to me. Why are you extending that time to put down some earnest money? If you don't have it, you shouldn't be writing an offer.
One thing that I experienced recently with a potential buyer was they sent a proof of funds for their lending, which was like kind of similar to this situation where it was like just some random out-of-state company and they were like, they have liquid funds. And I called and I talked to them and I asked them, I was like, do you guys finance the earnest money? And he said no. So that's just something that you just need to double check.
Right, that's a good
In good
point.
faith with the potential buyer that they have it.
That's a great point. Okay, so on the next slide, you represent the buyer. The property they are purchasing is owned by a hoarder. Literally in the house and in the backyard is full of personal property and debris. What would you write in the contract to protect your buyer, or at least try to protect your buyer? Well, I think we've all experienced this. We know, we walk in and we see that. If you think they're going to clean that out because you got the buyer, they live like that. So they don't see anything wrong with it. What kind of things might you write in your special agreements to try to help out?
So I experienced this. And we wrote in the special agreements, all contents to be removed prior to walkthrough. And they didn't do it. They got to walkthrough and nothing had been moved. And they had no intention of moving it. So in this case, it was a scream and deal. Buyers took it anyway. And I told them they could, seek legal advice to pursue their expense to clean it up. Would that have been the right thing to do?
Yeah, so we did talk about this a little bit last night. One thing would be that they'll give you a credit towards, if it's not on your final walkthrough, if it's not clear that there will be X amount of dollars, cashier's check or something to apply to get it removed, or to get a truck, one of those big trash trucks to put out in front to get rid of it. That's about the only thing. And obviously I just had this 2 weeks ago and it was the backyard. The problem was the backyard. It was an elderly seller and an older buyer, and it came down to the day of closing. The buyer wasn't going to close, and that can put your buyer in breach too. So I'm just saying, when you see that, I'm going to say probably 99.9% chance it's not going to be cleaned out. So try to come up with ideas, either credits or something like that. But I will say, by doing the final walkthrough, which I hope all of you are doing that, what's the issue? 4 days before closing, you go and it still looks that way. And they say, well, we're still working on it. Or you do it the day of closing and it looks like that. And it's not going to get done on time. So you could say, we want to walk through 2 weeks before closing to see how you're moving along. Does everybody do a final walkthrough?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
But don't ever do it for your client though, right? You all know that. The client needs to go. If the client can't go, they need to have a family member or a friend go for them, but you should never do that for them.
Yeah, I've
All
had
right,
agents do
anybody-
it for out-of-town buyers. I mean, investors.
Yeah, well, I would not take on, and I have a story I can tell you about why you don't do it. One of our agents did this years ago, and it happened to be a HUD property. And went through the kitchen, everything was great, went down the hallway, checked the bedrooms, everything was great. And left, went to closing table, got it all done. Buyers came in from out of town, go to move in. The refrigerator had been leaking. And the entire family room floor, wood floor, was damaged.
Mm.
And had ran down into the basement. So, and being a HUD property, there's no going back. They don't care. Good luck with that. So that's my story on why you don't do the final walkthrough. Okay, so the last thing is not really a question, but I want to talk to you about you have buyers and you've been writing offers for weeks, months, trying to get something accepted. What can we do to help improve our offer? And this came up this week actually with one of our agents, and it was a full price offer, but in the special agreements they wrote in, if the seller accepts our offer by 4 o'clock today, we'll increase our price by $5,000.
I don't like that.
Okay.
Had it work twice.
What?
It kind of pressures the seller into hurry up and make a decision. There were other offers on the table in that situation. So the 5,000 more looked, here's the other thing. I'll tell you, this happened this week in this office. So one of our agents wrote an offer $10,000 over asking. Okay. Then they had it appraised. It actually appraised for 20,000 over the asking price. So what that tells me is the listing agent did not evaluate that property. And I think that's happening to some of us, where the asking price is 100,000, but it's really worth 120, and we're writing 110 thinking we're going to get it. How many of you actually do a CMA for your buyer before they write the offer?
Every time.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think I would, only because that kind of situation I think is happening, and some agents think it's clever to underprice it and get 40 offers and try to get, you know, better price. But if I'm writing an offer for a buyer, I want to do a CMA so they know what's going on. Another thing we've been seeing lately is in terms of inspections, agents are writing in, buyer will not ask for any single repairs unless the item is over X amount. And
Yeah.
have you done that, Creighton?
Yeah, multiple times.
Hmm?
It's a high number, like 2,500 or
Yeah.
2,500, 3,000, just to cover anything like a roof, sewer lateral, big stuff that we may not
Structural.
know about.
Yeah. That way they know they're not gonna get nickel and dimed on GFIs and silly things that, you know, anybody could fix.
I do want a clear occupancy though. I do state that.
Okay, I like that. So just so you know, if you're writing on a special sales contract, does the seller have to have a municipal inspection?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No. Okay, we all know that. And Kathy, I'll ask her to elaborate on this idea. She had this the other day. The buyer will pay up to X amount for an appraisal amount. So maybe that amount was 10,000. They'll have a $10,000 appraisal gap, but they're not going to agree to anything less than the agreed upon price.
Anything more than the agreed upon price.
Correct. Yeah. I do that.
So I'm asking now, I've thrown out a few ideas. I'm asking you now to share some of your ideas with the rest of us on what's worked to get your offer accepted.
All of those things.
Cash is king, right? That's always good.
Get
So
a-
I make damn sure they can get financing. Neil,
Oh, always
get as
check with the
big a
seller to
earnest
find
deposit as
out
you
what
can.
their,
I find a bigger
Sorry.
earnest deposit helps.
right? Nice earnest money. You could always, that's a good point, make it a decent amount of earnest money. You could say upon acceptance, you'll add more earnest money. I've seen some with earnest money that says a non-refundable earnest money. Carol, what were you saying?
I always call and ask, what the seller's preferred closing date is also. Because
Yeah,
rather
that's
than
always
having to
good.
counter back and forth, if you don't, you know, that always makes it a little bit nicer too.
Right, I like
And
that.
above everything else that everybody else is saying on top of all of that.
Mhm.
Just make it as
Anything-
clean as possible.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, don't be
30-day
asking for
close.
personal property. I think asking for personal property and all that sort of thing, stop.
Yeah.
I mean, we went through a different market when we could ask for all those things. I would not be doing that now. You know, later on, after you got through certain things and you think they might want to sell something, that's a different negotiating, but to get in the door and get your offer accepted, wouldn't do that. Anybody else have anything to share about what about listings? How are you getting your listings? Is it your past clients? Are you getting calls from referrals?
Past
Great.
clients.
Past clients, okay. And Everett, what are you doing to stay in touch with your past clients?
Well, I'll try to call them at least. Right
Okay.
now.
Sean, I know you were talking earlier about your social media is helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I get, well, most of my clients are either follow me on social media or are friends of friends. So that's, and I've been really lacking in my social media in the last 6 months, but that's where most of my clients come from is social media. That's how they know I'm in the business and they just call or a friend of theirs calls, and so social media is important.
Okay. Creighton, what about you?
The phone is dead.
Oh,
Hello? Anybody?
hello. Carol, what about you? I noticed your business has picked up the last couple weeks. You were incredibly busy.
Well, I do quite a bit of social media, just not always about real estate. I think people get sick about that, but you know, I pimp out Frank's Cooking a lot. I get a lot of response on that. Handwritten notes. I try to remember everybody's birthdays. Send a little handwritten note on that. Recently started sending out just listed, and we'll definitely send out just solds.
Okay.
And I make phone calls constantly to clients and past clients. Just baloney calls. Hey, how are you doing? Hey, I saw this or whatever. Just a little bit of a personal touch to not lose that little bit of intimacy that you can create with a phone call rather than
So
just.
you're working your database, Carol.
Yep.
Right.
Always.
Joe, what about you?
Mostly my database, my social media. A few friends have referred me out, so
I like
that
your
really helped.
videos. Joe's home hacks.
Yeah,
Those are always
I've been
good.
trying to keep up the videos going.
Yeah, I like that.
I my investor got another investor involved, so now I've got two investors and now they're
Great.
talking about bringing in a third. So it's just kind of snowballing.
Nice.
So yeah.
Okay. Randy, what about you? Because how long have you been in the business, Randy?
I've been in for 9 years.
Okay.
And
So you
far,
find you're getting repeat business now?
I'm surviving on referrals and past clients who are sending me referrals. So
Okay.
I've been lucky.
Well, when you do a good job, it's not really luck. It's you did a good job and they tell other people you've done a good job, you know?
Yeah.
What about you, Neil?
USA sponsors agents for a platform called HomeBot. Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah, so tell us about that.
So you load in your past clients' information, and they send them automatic evaluations on their home. And then it's got a lot of little tools on it, like you could see how much you could get in, like if you wanted to do a cash out refi, you could just play around with it. How much have you paid, how much you would save if you paid extra principal payments every month, et cetera, et cetera. It's a neat little tool, and it costs the agent $25 a month. But
That's a
USA
good deal.
co-sponsored, yeah. And
I like
so
that.
it sends those out once a month to each of the clients that you load on there. And then there's also a buyer component to that, but I haven't really gotten to that to get that completely figured out. But
Okay.
it automatically sends those emails out once a month, and then I follow that up with an email or an actual letter through the mail, just to see if they've got any questions, they understand it, that kind of thing.
Great. Kathy, what about you guys?
Oh, Brian works his database and he gets referrals and he does social media, so he does it all.
Yeah. And Jamie, you're pretty new to the business. What have you been doing to generate your leads?
Sorry, I was muted. Just trying to make friends here. So
Yeah.
Kyle's been pimping me out to the people at his workplace. So one of my
Nice.
clients was one of them. I have one of the fingerprint people that I fingerprinted several months ago, finally was ready to start looking, and I have her under contract right now.
Great.
So, and yeah, just people that I friend on social media here. If they some of them have been clients so far, and so every time they post something about their house, I'll just like make sure to talk to them about it, comment.
Perfect.